You're watching I-24 News. I'm Eli Roberts in Tel Aviv with the top stories at this hour. We start at the Gaza border, where the Kerem Shalom border crossing into Gaza reopened this morning. It is the crossing where nearly all goods and fuel enter the Gaza Strip. Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman also announcing today that the Gaza Strip's fishing zone will be extended. Lieberman saying on Facebook in Arabic that he differentiates between Hamas leadership and the residents of Gaza, and that Gaza could become the Singapore of the Middle East if they decide to channel their money to welfare and not terror. And let's go live to I-24 defense correspondent Daniel Tsemak, who is standing by at Kerem Shalom border crossing. Daniel, the border crossing has been open now for 4 hours. How is it going so far today?
Well, Eli, really for the first time in several months, or specifically 2 months, that's according to some of the truck drivers we've spoken to, we're seeing this much traffic, really a line of trucks that have been lined up far beyond the entrance to the crossing. It hasn't been this busy in quite a while. We actually had a chance earlier to talk to some people here that work at the crossing, as well as some truck drivers, to hear what their opinion is on the decision to really reopen the humanitarian channel this morning. Let's take a listen to what some of them had to say.
It's good to do this because the people over there are suffering a lot. And it's good for everyone, for us, for them, for everyone. We've sat here for over 3 months with nothing to bring to them. Now we're starting to work. I hope it ends well and they stop the nonsense and it will be okay. No one is after them and they're also not after us.
And Daniel, talk about the transfer of goods into the Strip. How does all of that work?
Well, Eli, we actually had a chance to go inside to the crossing today to get a sense of really what the process is. It starts here on this side. These are Israeli trucks. They enter the crossing itself into Kerem Shalom, where the goods are taken out of these trucks and transferred to what are called sterile trucks, being driven by Gazans, by Palestinians living in Gaza. Some 70 Gazan truck drivers work here. They bring the goods to the other side, where they then remove them again after going through 2 security checks, going into Gaza, transferred to other trucks, where they're then delivered to the different bodies, different organizations, and different populations on the other side. So we're talking about 2 different transfers of those goods into 3 different security checks. It's a fairly thorough process in order to ensure that it's done safely and that there are no other goods being transferred. That's why they have that truck that goes from Israel's side into the Gazan side without crossing over. That happens really just beyond the crossing you can see behind me. So there are a few steps after, at the end of the day, though, those goods, some 700 trucks today alone, will be transferring goods into Gaza. Food, medicine, cement, even household goods. We saw shoes and things of that sort. A lot of goods are going to be transferred over there today.
It is a big job. Daniel Tsemak live for us at the Kerem Shalom border crossing. Thank you. The Jewish Home political party says it will oppose any ceasefire agreement with Hamas in Gaza. Education Minister and Security Cabinet member Naftali Bennett says a long-term agreement with the group will give Hamas the chance to rearm and stockpile rockets. Opposition leader Tzipi Livni and Avi Gabay also criticized the deal, saying that instead of making a deal with moderates, Prime Minister Netanyahu reached out and supported Hamas. Bennett's statement of opposition is the first acknowledgement that a ceasefire deal may be in the works, even though his statement was indirect. And I-24 diplomatic correspondent Eli Hockenberg is bringing us the latest on that story. And if what Avigdor Lieberman's political party, Yisrael Beitenu, said is true, that this is just petty politics for Naftali Bennett to bring up this issue in that way, what would Naftali Bennett have to gain? Well,
before we dive into the political aspect of it, let's try to break it all down. First of all, as we speak, the Security Cabinet meeting is convening once again to discuss this materializing agreement, a short-term one, not a long-term one. And this is a major part of the criticism that a short-term agreement will not include the very sensitive issue of releasing the IDF soldiers' bodies being held captive by Hamas and Israeli citizens there. So this is a main point that will not be included in a short-term agreement. And indeed, we hear Naftali Bennett vowing that his party and he himself, as a Security Cabinet member, will not support such a formulating agreement. Another element from the right, former coalition whip David Bitan from the ruling Likud party, blamed today the IDF, the chief of staff, for directing or misleading the security cabinet in the direction of signing a deal with Hamas rather than keeping the option of actions on the ground open. And interestingly enough, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appears to be dodging this bullet, and Avigdor Lieberman, the defense minister, is getting most of the fire. As for the political battle between Bennett and Lieberman, it is very clear. We already smell elections coming soon, and Bennett is definitely eyeing the position of defense minister. So attacking or directly Avigdor Lieberman is potentially politically beneficial in his part, regardless to his concrete points that he's raising on the content of the materializing agreement.
And of course, everyone smells those early elections, including Tzipi Livni and Avi Gabay, because they're also coming out and they're saying Netanyahu shouldn't have a deal with Hamas because he should deal with moderates first. Does that even make sense?
Well, it's actually quite interesting, because if you think about it, the opposition, the Labor, which is center-left or left, is saying no deal at all, while Bennett is saying yes deal, but a different deal. So to a certain extent, they're taking an even harsher position than Bennett. Tzipi Livni is saying we need to form a coalition, a regional coalition against Hamas to bring them down. Earlier this week, we had reports indicating a meeting between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi earlier this year, discussing Sisi's plan for restoring calm or stabilizing the Strip. He's saying the Palestinian Authority must take over. And just a quick anecdote before we wrap it up. Today, we're marking 13 years since the unilateral move of Israel, the disengagement from the Gaza Strip. Then the supporters of the disengagement said that it will turn the Gaza Strip into the Switzerland of the Middle East. Today we hear Lieberman saying it's Singapore. Neither option seems very feasible at this point, Eli.
Stay with me, because we have much more to talk about.
Indeed.
And that will be about the American author and former CNN host Reza Aslan, who claimed on Twitter this week that Israeli security forces detained and intimidated him as he was crossing the border from Jordan. This comes on the back of the recent detention of another journalist and author, Peter Beinart, who was held and questioned at Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion International Airport over the weekend. Aslan said that Beinart's encounter with Israeli security pushed him to share his own story, including how he was allegedly separated from his family during the detention. He also said security officials told him that they could make it so that he wouldn't see his kids for a long time. And a heads up, our Tracy Alexander will have an I-24 News exclusive interview with Peter Beinart today on Perspectives. And Ellie, I want to talk about what happened to Reza Aslan and also to Peter Beinart, because is this a change in policy? Are we starting to see more people being questioned at the airport, at the border, for their political views? And if so, why?
Well, in recent months, definitely more and more incidents of similar nature. When the Beinart case was unfolding, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was very clear to say that it was an administrative mistake, not a policy. All the authorities involved, the Shin Bet and the border control, also echoed this message. It was a mistake, not an intentional decision, but we have witnessed several incidents very similar to Beinart's interrogation. And I think that at this point in time, there is some sort of consensus that it's counterproductive, especially when we're talking about the appearance or the PR for Israel. Michael Oren, Deputy Minister at the Prime Minister's office and formerly the Israeli ambassador to the United States, a member of the ruling coalition, said yesterday that it is a perfect example of how you damage your own perception and your own strategic agenda. So I believe that politicians and leaders, Isaac Herzog, the newly appointed head of the Jewish Agency, also talked about it. They all understand or acknowledge the fact that such incidents are not contributing to Israel, to say the least.
All right. Eli Hockenberg, thank you for that analysis. And of course, Netanyahu did condemn the holding of Peter Beinart, as you said. And a heads up that Tracy Alexander will have an interview with Peter Beinart on Perspectives today here on I-24 News. Next on I-24, Turkey's economy in trouble, and the problems are getting worse. Why are the U.S. and Turkey fighting it out? They're both NATO members. That conversation next.
David Schuster.
And I'm Shayna Stulin.
Join us on I-24 News for our show Crossroads.
We bring you a comprehensive
and engaging
look at the global news and opinions from the crossroads of America.
Weeknights beginning at 6 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
What you need to know, the news, fast and to the point, and the in-depth interviews that will keep you in your seat from the people that you trust. I-24 News presents The New Rundown. Co-hosted by Nurit Ben and Kalev Ben David. Only on I-24 News.
As the Turkish lira crashes, Turkey is putting more tariffs on American products. A decree signed by Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan puts a 120% tax on American-made cars, 140% on American alcohol, and 60% on tobacco. The U.S. and Turkey have been in a back-and-forth argument over an American pastor who was detained 22 months ago, with Turkish authorities refusing to release him. Turkey says he played a role in the failed 2016 coup against President Erdogan. Today, a Turkish court rejected his appeal to be released. The Turkish lira has lost 40% against the U.S. dollar since the start of the year. And I-24 International Affairs correspondent Bianca Anini is here bringing us the latest on this story. Bianca, Turkey has the most to lose in this conversation, and their economy is in shambles at the moment, losing 40% against the dollar, the Turkish lira, since the start of the year.
Right.
Why isn't Erdogan backing down?
Well, I think there are three aspects to answering that question. First of all, it's a matter of personality. If you look at Erdogan, he's very similar to Trump, to his opponent in this case. They're both very strong men, very proud, very concerned about keeping an image of strength. So neither is likely to publicly back down or to want to publicly back down at all. Then there's the practical aspect, of course. And the reality is, as you mentioned yourself, Turkey's economy has been in trouble for a while. And this is giving Erdogan someone to... an explanation, an excuse, right? Someone to blame. And it appeals to the populism, to the nationalism of the people, and he's garnering support with this. And then thirdly, there's the international context, which is important to keep in mind here. Recently, we've seen Turkey getting closer and closer to Russia, and Trump's tariffs on Turkey and his sanctions on Russia has brought them even closer. We've heard the Russian foreign minister and the Turkish finance minister talking together about having this united front against the U.S. standing together. And of course, this is not just economic, it's very political. And it has very big potential for very big global consequences. And it's part of Trump's foreign policy decisions. And Turkey is just one of 3 countries that has been hit the hardest by these decisions. So let's take a look at this report that I made on this.
You're either in or you're out. Trump's foreign policy decisions, it's not about America's allies, but about America's interests, are having very real effects on the ground globally. Trump has jumped headfirst into trade wars with most of Europe, China, and even with Canada, causing global worry. Meanwhile, some countries are hit harder than others by his hammer. Iran, Russia, and Turkey feeling a significant impact.
In all 3 cases with Iran, Russia, and Turkey, we see how economic actions can also be used as a tool of foreign policy. All 3 of these countries are not big trading partners with the United States. They're not big economies in their own right, but they all are bad actors who are causing destabilization in their regions. And it is clear that this tariff policy is meant to try to rein them back in.
Despite pleadings and warnings from the international community, the American president left the Iran nuclear deal in May, then reimposing severe sanctions on Tehran, first on trade, cars and peanuts, and then from November on oil. The Iranian economy now struggling to gain ground as the American pressure continues. Then this week, Trump decided to double U.S. metal sanctions on Ankara. This in retaliation for the detention of an American pastor who Turkey accuses of supporting a failed military coup 2 years ago. The Turkish lira losing ground against the dollar, worsening an already shaky economy.
I think Turkey and Iran in particular are more similar in terms of the impact that sanctions are having. Both are experiencing already have structural problems when it came to their economies. And with the imposition of U.S. sanctions, things have even gotten worse. Both leaders will have to grapple in pretty significant ways with rising discontent.
Then there's Russia. While Trump himself has been determined to build relations with Putin, Washington has slapped congressionally mandated sanctions on Moscow. The Kremlin's attempt to protect themselves from American and European sanctions has thwarted opportunities for growth. For all Putin's strength, his country's currency is weak. The so-called Trump doctrine, where America first means America on top by itself, has spurred strong international reactions. The latest, Chinese state radio warning the world of Washington's economic policies as a black hole that may destroy global prosperity. Others argue Trump is doing what needs to be done.
It is a moderate approach between the alternatives of either soft diplomacy, which we have seen does not work with these kind of hostile states, or more aggressive action, which could cause greater destabilization.
From his reality TV show to his Oval Office, for Donald Trump, it's his way or the highway. Bianca Anini, I-24 News.
And Bianca, thank you for that. And we're going to shift gears now to Christine Quist, because she might become the first transgender governor in the United States. She is running against current Vermont Governor Phil Scott, but some see her nomination as a big step forward. Quist made the transition while she was at the helm of the Vermont Electric Co-op, making her one of the few corporate leaders to have a sex change while holding such a high role. Scott became the governor of Vermont in 2016. And Bianca, this is your chance to comment on this as well. Why is this making headlines around the world today?
Right, so of course, Quist's nomination and potential win is very historic. Last year, we did see Danica Roem, also from the Democratic Party. She was elected to the Virginia House of Delegates, but this is the first time we could actually see a transgender governor. Vermont is quite progressive on civil rights issues, and this all carries a lot of symbolic and actual weight for the LGBT community that's historically been quite underrepresented when it comes to political figures, right? But equally important to this particular win is the context that this is happening and that her story is happening in. Quist is part of a wave of minority candidates from the Democratic Party that are running on an anti-Trump platform. We're seeing women, we're seeing Latinos, we're seeing Muslims, and there are all these sort of younger voices trying to respond to Trump's bat signal. That's how we've seen it put, and that's what they're pointing to. And these candidates are running for office all over the country, and they're challenging not only the Republicans, but also the Democratic establishment and what the Democratic Party sees themselves as.
And of course, Quist certainly is the exception because she's 56, but a lot of the other people are very young. It's an interesting change.
This wave, you know, pointing to an anti-Trump agenda.
Okay, Bianca Anini, thank you for that. And next on I-24 News, it wasn't supposed to happen. A bridge in Genoa, Italy, crashing to the ground, killing at least 37 people. How a bridge could just fall apart like that. That story next.
Coffee, honey?
Roku Express. Now 500,000 movies and TV episodes? This is the ultimate streaming adventure.
Jack. Oh, great choice. Hey, where's my coffee?
Whether you're just getting out of bed or starting your day, or you're already hard at work, we cut through the clutter to give you the right dose. Breaking news and top headlines from Israel, the Middle East, and around the world. Politics, pop culture, sports, and music. We track the big stories from the heart of the Middle East. Brace yourself for your daily dose of news.
I-24 News anywhere, anytime. Download our app. I-24 News. See beyond.
The Middle East, cradle of civilization, epicenter of the major crisis and conflicts that affect our world today. I-24 News is a witness. Our journalists live and breathe there every day. Get all the latest from our studios in Tel Aviv, New York, Washington, and Paris. As news happens where it happens. I-24 News. See beyond.
Every stone, every street, every scar tells the story of Israel. A place that speaks of the souls of Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. Changed by time and conflicted, its magic still echoes in the hearts of its people. Join I-24 News' Jordana Miller on a journey through history. Watch Holy Land Uncovered every Sunday at 10:05 a.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
The trends, the fads, the breakthroughs. Get it all on Trending. From food, music, and art to advances in modern medicine. Meet the trendsetters and the tech giants who make it all happen on Trending with Emily Francis.
Welcome back. You're watching I-24 News. Police in London had the suspect in custody in connection to yesterday's terrorist attack on the Parliament building. Authorities say they think Sudanese-born Saleh Khater carried out the car ramming that saw him drive a car into the barrier outside of the Parliament. Officials say Khater was not a known person to the MI5 or counterterrorism police, but local police say they did know who he was. Khater is reportedly refusing to cooperate with investigators. And people living in London say they are concerned about the current state of security in the city. In the UK, it's also getting bad. The car ramming was the most recent act of terror there. 3 people were injured and the city was left on edge.
I just thought it was a man who'd had a crash. But then when they said that people had been injured, it just makes you wonder, you know, where you're safe, really, you know. So it's so awful.
And now, headed down under, the far-right movement is not leaving Australia untouched. Queensland Senator Fraser Anning stunned lawmakers during his first speech to the country's parliament. He used the Nazi phrase, final solution, but this time in reference to non-white and non-Christian immigrants to Australia. Anning called on lawmakers to go back to what was known as the White Australia policy, which came into effect in 1901 and lasted for 7 decades. Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull condemned the speech. Russian President Vladimir Putin is calling for a meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and he wants it to happen as soon as possible. Putin says he wants to talk about what he called important issues relating to bilateral matters. Kim met Trump in a historic summit back in May, and Trump met Putin in July. All of this happening outside of China, where Russia is the closest ally of North Korea outside of China. Recovery crews are now digging through the rubble in Genoa, Italy, where a highway bridge collapsed. Authorities say the bodies of 37 victims killed have been recovered, though the death toll is expected to rise as authorities look for survivors. Here's I-24 Steve Langford.
Oh God, a man wails over and over at the apocalyptic sight of a bridge collapsing in front of his eyes. The disaster striking just before noon Tuesday in Italy, in the middle of a violent rainstorm. Dozens of cars and trucks atop the Morandi Bridge in Genoa at the time of the catastrophe. The demand for answers immediate. Tonight will be the time to find out who was responsible, declares Italy's Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini, demanding the names of those who are guilty of unacceptable deaths, he says. A criminal investigation will be launched. The bridge opened in 1967 as part of the A10 freeway, which runs from Genoa to the French border. The span plummeted about 150 feet onto an industrial area below. First responders by the hundreds braving precarious conditions to try to find survivors. There are a few, but dozens have perished here. At least 10 vehicles are believed to have plunged into the abyss.
Speriamo di trovare ancora qualcuno vivo.
We hope to find more people alive, police spokeswoman Alessandra Bucci says. We think there are other people alive under the rubble. This is a clear example of how not to build a bridge, says Antonio Brencic, professor of engineering at the University of Genoa. A 51-year-old bridge, he says, should not fail. In New York, Steve Langford, I-24 News.
And finally, child sex abuse in the Catholic Church in Pennsylvania. At least 1,000 victims and allegations against more than 300 predator priests uncovered in a grand jury report. But most of the crimes were committed too long ago to prosecute today. Here's the state attorney general.
All of the victims were brushed aside in every part of the state by church leaders who preferred to protect the abusers and their institutions above all. Priests were raping little boys and girls, and the men of God who were responsible for them not only did nothing, they hid it all for decades.
And at last, tornadoes wreaked havoc throughout China, with Sansha on Hainan Island getting hit hardest. There were also reports of tornadoes in the northern city of northern Shandong province, Dongying City, that is. The country has been hit by heavy rain and thunderstorms in recent weeks, causing damage across China. Flooded rivers have destroyed bridges, blocked roads, and forced thousands of people to evacuate their homes. And we leave you with these images from China. You're watching I-24 News.